Hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 6 of the True North podcast. I'm your host, Benedict Rhodes. On today's episode, I'm joined by legendary Canadian swimming coach Byron MacDonald from the University of Toronto Varsity Blues and the Toronto Titans of the International Swimming League. Over the next 35 minutes or so, we discuss everything from his legacy as a coach, his own Olympic and Commonwealth Games experiences, some coaching philosophies, Canada's current golden generation of swimmers, and his time as a broadcaster at CBC. All of that and more on this episode of the True North podcast. Hope you enjoy it. I'm very excited now to be joined by Byron MacDonald. Byron, how are you? And thank you for taking the time.
I'm great, Benedict. This will be great. This will be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Let's dive in, so to speak. You're the head coach at the University of Toronto, of course, and this past week you're at the OUA Swimming Championships. I see behind you all the pictures and things. Your team's had a fantastic meet, of course, sweeping the podium in several events and winning the men's and women's competitions. What were the major takeaways for you from the weekend?
Well, yeah, the pictures behind me are all the years, the team pictures, basically, right? And there's a lot of them. I've been here 45 years. So the takeaways from the weekend is that with our team, because we've been able to attract enough talent on top swimmers with pretty lofty goals, our goal is always the national championships. And unlike team sports where you have to kind of qualify through your conference championship and to go to the nationals, in swimming and track, you post times, and that basically gets you to the nationals. So we knew the team that we were going to take, and we knew they'd all qualified and we were going to go to the nationals, which is in 10 days. So we don't swim through or belittle the Ontario Championships, but it's not the main goal. The main goal is the nationals in 10 days. So that's what we're really setting our hopes on and our plans for. But at the same time, it's important to swim well at the conference championships and for many different reasons, not the least of which is feedback to see if we're on track to where we want to be. And the athletes did a great job, better than probably, I shouldn't say this, but probably better than I expected in many cases. And that's important too, because obviously, usually because it's local, I mean, it was at Western, but it's local, meaning it's in Ontario, a lot of family and friends and that can attend and see it. So it's always nice to be able to swim fast. And I thought they did a great job.
You mentioned, you've been the head coach of that program for 45 years now, and your assistant, Linda Kiefer, has been with you for 33 years as well. How has the program evolved since you first joined, and what does it mean to you to have not only been there for so long, but really kind of be able to shape it in your own way?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have your own program, quote unquote, right? The athletic department's been very, very good about allowing me to basically do what I want, when I want, how I want. I'm the master of the destiny here, right? Within, obviously within the parameters of the university and the guidelines, et cetera. But so I've been able to shape the program the way I want. And when I was hired, the coach that was here before decided to step aside to let me come in because he said he felt he could take the team to a national level, but not an international level. And we were opening the new pool, which obviously I've been training in ever since I almost got here. It opened a year after I got here. On a big, brand new 50-meter indoor pool and that. So he felt that the team should be getting loftier and be looking towards international goals. And so, that was the way I was able to shape the program, was to move it towards international goals as well as obviously domestic, national goals as well. But, we've always had a lot of international athletes. So that's been the goal coming in and the goal that we've been able to maintain, and at the same time not losing sight of the fact that I am hired by the university, and the university is making sure the student experience is fantastic. And I think we've done a very good job with that. So,
you mentioned you've had a lot of international athletes, and some of the more notable ones recently, I guess, are Kylie Moss and Rebecca Smith in recent years. What do you remember about coaching those two, and who else has really stood out to you over the years?
Well, it's very interesting because Rebecca moved out to Toronto to be at the National Center, which is based out at the Pan Am Pool on the east end of the city in Scarborough, on the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. And she moved out at 16, billeted. They actually weren't going to be able to make it work. And I found one of my alumni that would billet her and house her for a couple of years. So she was only 16 years old. And then when that was over at the end of the leading into the Olympics, she made the Olympic team, won a medal and everything, and then came to U of T. The problem was that she wanted to be a nurse, and missing all those years with COVID and everything meant that her academic program had fallen way behind because she hadn't gone to school during those 2-year prep. Usually it's only a 1-year prep, but it was 2 years because of COVID delay. And the nursing program here is a post-grad program. So she was willing to do the 4 years and then go. But after missing 2, she kind of went, it's going to take me forever. And so she is from Red Deer originally. And she went back out to, back home to Calgary, where it's an undergrad program. And she's in the nursing program. So we still keep in touch with her. We talk to her, Rebecca, all the time. Wonderful, wonderful young woman. And Kylie Moss was very unique in the sense that she wasn't ranked very high. I mean, Rebecca, when she came in, was already an international athlete. Whereas Kylie was, I think we've done the stats, she was 201st in the world in her event. So really not that what you'd call an elite swimmer. And most women, by the time they're 18, they're pretty well elite if they're going to be world champions or world beaters. And she wasn't. She was only 201st in the world. And a lot of people actually thought she was a butterflyer. And I felt she was a backstroker, and obviously hit the nail on the head with that one, right? And Kylie is probably the most unassuming elite athlete I've ever coached. You would never know being around her that she was an Olympic medalist, a world champion, a world record holder. And all that happened very quickly after she got here. After the first year, she didn't quite make the national team after her first year, but she improved to put herself in the challenging position. The next year was Olympic year. She went to the Olympics, won a medal. And the following year after that, she was world champion and a world record holder, and really hasn't looked back. She's now graduated and moved on, and she's out at the National Center. But again, we stay very close to her. It was a great experience. And other athletes over the years, we've had several others. I've had somebody on every Olympic team, so I've been able to have different concepts, different people. Most of them were fairly high maintenance, I will admit. As opposed to Kylie, who's incredibly low maintenance, works so hard and is so dedicated and does everything you ask. And I don't mind the high maintenance athletes. I mean, they need some special attention sometimes. So I just make sure that I'm giving 110 or 120% to everybody, so that if the high maintenance people are getting a little bit more, others are not suffering. And I think that's a key to a good environment, when everybody feels they're getting the attention they need.
And who's up next? Like who do you see at the moment at U of T, or from maybe the Canadian university scene in general, who could maybe potentially crack a national team roster one day?
We've got a young man here named Gabe Master Mateo from small town of Kenora. And I mean, obviously the lucky part about him was, normally in these smaller towns, you may not have a program that can work very well, but his mom's a coach and she's pretty good at it. And so in a small town like that, she was able to do the things that he needed when he was in high school, and grade school, to advance his career to the point where he was on the doorstep. So I had meetings with the family, and he actually moved down here in grade 12 to put the big push in for the Olympics. And of course, then COVID hit. So nothing happened, but then he was always planning on coming to U of T. So he came the next year, and in his first year, he made the Olympic team, and he was on a relay that surprisingly made the finals. They were 8th place at the Olympic Games. So that's basically, one of the top athletes in the country right now in the university system. Major setback in 2022. He got COVID, and a bad case of it, or 2021, whatever it was. And he was out for 8 weeks and really didn't get back to training for about 4 or 5 months. He said, it felt like somebody was sitting on his chest. Like he had a pretty bad case. So, but now it's a new year. We've had that's behind us now, and he's moving forward. So there are people that are exceptional within the U Sports system, and there will be several, I'm sure, that'll make the Olympic team.
And you mentioned COVID a couple of times now. How did you, as a coach and the university in general, I guess, recruit athletes who maybe didn't have a season or weren't able to compete other than maybe the occasional training session?
Yeah, I mean, a great point. But I think it's a little bit easier in the sport of swimming because obviously, in a basketball or a football, there would have been no games to recruit kids or look at kids, watch kids. And you probably hadn't been looking at them when they were in grade 10 or 11. You're probably going to wait till grade 12. But for us, they post times, obviously. It doesn't matter if they do it up in Kenora. It doesn't matter if they do it in Calgary or Moncton or wherever it is. A pool is a pool is a pool. So they post a time. So I would kind of know who the good athletes were. And maybe they didn't get a grade 12 season, which a lot of them didn't. But they did get a grade 11 season. And, they're 17 years of age at that point. So they're able to post a reasonable time, and I can compare that around the country. So we kind of knew who the recruits were that we wanted to aim for. And as it was, we ended up with several very, very good recruits, and we're quite excited about that.
And you yourself, of course, were once on the Canadian national team, and including a couple Commonwealth Games gold medals and a trip to the 72 Olympics. What are some of the fondest memories from your own swimming career?
Uh, I mean, winning a gold medal is amazing. When I won the gold medal at the Commonwealth Games, it was extra special because it was my first ever international team. And, probably 2 years before that, I really had no thoughts of swimming internationally. So it was, I guess a little bit like Kylie, my career kind of took off very quickly and advanced very quickly. And so winning a gold medal was amazing, but what made it even, more special was that Canada went 1, 2, 3. The gentleman that was second was a guy named Tommy Russo, who I'm still friends with. And the guy that was third was Ron Jacks out of Vancouver. And again, I raced him a lot and knew him, and I've seen him at all the national championships. He's a coach now too and doing a very good job. So it's kind of neat. And the first time ever it happened internationally, I think in any sport for Canada, where we swept the podium. So that was quite special. It was in Edinburgh, Scotland, which made it a little bit easier. And what I mean by that is everybody speaks English in Scotland, right? It's my first international team. And the next year we went to South America. It's a whole different ballgame when you're feeling very alien in a situation where you can't communicate, you need something, you can't talk to anybody because you don't speak the language. So it was another way to ease into my international career up there at those games. So nowadays things have changed. That's not true. Commonwealth Games, you're still allowed 3 entries per country. But back when I was swimming, you were allowed 3 entries per country in the Olympics too, but now you're not. In the sport of swimming, it's down to 2 in all the international competitions, with the exception of the Commonwealth Games.
And looking at Munich in particular, I know you were in the final of the 100-meter butterfly, and you raced against the legendary Mark Spitz. What do you remember about that event and against racing against one of the greatest swimmers ever, really?
Yeah, it was. And a lot of people ask me because obviously I've been around long enough to see. For those that don't know, Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals in 1972. He was actually supposed to win 6 or 7 in 1968 as a high schooler, grade 12. And then the pressure got to him, and he was a bit brash, and it kind of pissed off even a lot of his teammates. And I think they were actually probably happy he didn't win so many gold medals, which makes it tough as a kid, right? But then by the time he was 22 in his last year of university in Munich, he had kind of steeled himself against the world, and wasn't the friendliest guy because of that experience, but he was a great swimmer. And then they say, well, what about Michael Phelps? Isn't he? And the difference between the two is that Michael also had a phenomenal work ethic and a pretty hard driving coach. And Michael, I would say, earned them. I mean, he was a talented athlete, but he was also one of the fittest athletes in the world. And whereas Mark Spitz, he didn't train very much, right? Most people don't know that. He was so gifted that he probably could have picked up 2 or 3 more gold medals. He was that good. With the program actually back then was only over 6 days, I believe. Now it's over 9, so you can spread it out and win more. So I would argue that Mark was probably the greater athlete. But again, they're just incredible people. So I raced Mark numerous times because I went to university in the U.S. and he was at the rival university. And so I raced him 3 or 4 times every year and had done it since grade 12. So, great competitor, was never, ever going to beat him. Bottom line is when all of us stood up on the podium or now in the starting blocks, we basically felt the gold medal was the silver medal because nobody was beating Mark. So.
And what about the event itself of going to the Olympics? A lot of kids dream of being part of such a big event. And what was it like for you away from the pool? Being in the village or just being around the quote unquote the biggest event in sports?
Yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. And what I mean by that is, my first experience was the Commonwealth Games, and there were, maybe 3,000 people in the stands, and the South American Games, the Pan Am Games the following year, and even the World Championships. They were small spectator events. This is massive. The village is 10,000 people. It's like a city on its own, obviously, right? And there were, I don't know, 15,000 fans or something like that. It's just and really basically because of the mass media, everybody is paying attention. Everybody back home knows. People back home don't necessarily know you're at the Commonwealth Games. Certainly the Pan Am Games in South America, they weren't following. I don't know if it was live TV. But the Olympics, everybody follows. So that it's the big stage, and it's quite pleasing to have made it and be there. I feel sorry for the Munich people and the German government because it was a perfect games. It really was. All the facilities were. This was sort of the first massive games, I guess, for lack of another word, right? Mexico City in '68 was a pretty big games, but it was in October. Some of the countries didn't send full teams, etc. And Munich was incredible. It was a giant games, tons of people. Everything was perfect. The venues were unbelievable. Some of them are still in use today. And, that's pretty rare with some of the Olympic facilities you hear about. So it was a great, great situation. And then unfortunately there was a terrorist incident, and that's all anybody remembers from the games. And really, it was a phenomenal, phenomenal games.
And when did you know you wanted to be a coach, and how did these experiences and your time in the pool make you a better coach?
Well, that's a great question, because I never planned on being a coach. Benedict, I did a commerce degree, and I was fully prepared to go into big business. My dad worked in a giant printing company in the U.S., paper company or whatever, and one of my best friends ended up working there, and I probably would have too. But what ended up happening was that after the Olympics, I did a backpacking trip through Europe because I'd graduated university, and kind of started thinking that maybe I needed to do a little bit more swimming. And then nowadays you read about Michael Phelps going to 5 Olympics, and all these people. Kylie Moss, our athlete's going to go to her 3rd Olympics this coming next Paris. And people back in my day didn't do that. You weren't allowed to make any money as an athlete back then. All right. You couldn't do endorsements. You couldn't do anything. And so for that reason, basically you did one and done. All right. And especially if you're 22 years of age, you weren't going to hang around. So it was pretty abnormal to make a decision to stick around. And I did. I decided I was going to go because the Olympics were in Montreal. I kind of thought, you know what, maybe I'll stick around for 4 more years. But in particular, I'll stick around for a couple more, because the World Student Games were the following year, and they were in Moscow. And that may not have allured everybody now, but back then that was like, going to see the Darth Vader and then the evil force, right? Because it was the middle of the Cold War. So to be able to go into Moscow, I thought was going to be cool. And then 6 months later, the Commonwealth Games were going to be in New Zealand. I thought, you know what, to go down under would be pretty special. And then I'll stay down there, which I did after the games, actually, and surfed for a couple of months. So that was sort of the idea. And then once I was sticking around, I kind of went, you know what, I started out with an MBA program here at U of T, and decided I was tired of commerce, and I switched over into recreation, basically, physical education. And that sort of got me thinking, then what am I going to do later? And then the coaching just kind of fell in my lap. And I thought it was an idea to try, not thinking I would stay with it for a huge long time. But it jumped right off the bat to a real success and real enjoyment. So that was going to be my path.
And what are some of your coaching philosophies? I know it varies by swimmer, of course, but what do you look for in the swimmers? And using Kylie as example, maybe how do you turn a good swimmer into a great swimmer?
Well, that's $1 million question. Obviously, if we had the answer to that, we'd have even more great swimmers. There's in order to, I'm trying to think. The number one aspect. Well, to back it up, okay, like the philosophies and stuff that I learned, I was very, very fortunate in this. Upon reflection, might be why I ended up in coaching. All right, is that the 5 coaches, in essence, the 5 major coaches that I had through my sort of high school years and then university years and then post-university, they're all in the Hall of Fame. And I'm talking like the American Hall of Fame, the World Coaches Hall of Fame. Like, these guys were luminaries in their sport. They were leaders, they were cutting edge, and they were committed 100%. They lived and died their coaching. And I think that rubbed off on me. And so, and I've taken little bits from each. One of them was an unbelievable authoritarian taskmaster, and that's not me as a personality. And so what I took from that was not to do that. Right. And then, one of the ones that I got along the best with, he was pretty open and pretty, I don't know, jovial is not the right word, but it was a fun atmosphere to be around and in the pool. And I felt that was something that I would want to create. A lot of times, particularly in the U.S., it's a pretty general, and everybody are soldiers, and it's top down. And I just didn't feel that was what I wanted to do. So I've tried to make it a little bit more open and a little bit less authoritarian, I guess, would be the way to do it. So, and then using that, what you do is then you take a look at the kids and call them athletes, and what is it that's going to work for them? And the same thing won't work for swimmer A and swimmer B. Swimmer B may need to have a little bit more firm direction, and swimmer A may not. They may rebel. And I've had both sides of that spectrum where, I've had an athlete walk in and go, yeah, I really don't want to do that workout today. And yet this was an athlete that's top 6 in the world. And so you're figuring, okay, well, how can you motivate that athlete and do something different with them, as opposed to most of the athletes will do the other program, the main program, and stick with it. So you have to be a bit flexible. A lot of great coaches will tell you compromise is a death knell. If you compromise too much, then the athletes aren't going to get what they need. But you do have to figure out how to be flexible and how to be firm at the same time.
And you're also, of course, the head coach of the Toronto Titans in the ISL. What do you make of this kind of innovation, I guess, to try and make professional swimming more of a TV product as opposed to just seeing the major events every 2 or 4 years? And also, I know there's a hiatus last year, but what's the future of this league and how big can it maybe get?
Well, I hope the future's great, but I'm a little worried, to be honest. It was a great initiative. It was fantastic. It was needed. And again, as I said, the sport's growing, and what's happening is swimmers are swimming into their late 20s, and they never did. So basically, they would be done at 22, 23, 24, in which case you could do that in your university program. A lot of the best coaches are coaching in university programs in North America anyway. And so it was easy to do. But all of a sudden now, 26, 27, 28, well, you don't really want that group to be training with 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. So, there are some national centers, which didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. And so that solves it a little bit, but it doesn't totally solve it because it's very individualized, and you need something else for excitement and all that. And the ISL brought all of that to the forefront. It was very cool to be the head coach of the Toronto franchise because, we had, I think, 16 swimmers from 16 different countries on our squad. I mean, there's only 40 swimmers. The one thing that maybe the listeners might not understand is that it's not like the Toronto Blue Jays where everybody came and we played together and trained together and everything for 6 months. It's more like, what was the comparison I used? Like cycling or maybe even European Cup or World Cup of Soccer, where you bring them together for that one event and then they go back to their home clubs. And that's what the ISL did. We brought them together. We competed for a couple of weeks. It was during the lockdown, so we actually got locked down in Hungary. And then they went back to their programs, and then we brought them back again when COVID was over, and we got another season off the ground. So we're kind of flying people in and out, but we still had to build a team. So it was a great experience. It was great. I think it was good TV. There were a few unique twists that we put into it, but it's a fair bit of ways from being economically feasible, Benedict, and that's obviously going to be the challenge. The gentleman that was in charge of it, his vision, loves the sport of swimming. Lucky for all of us, because it was probably a $20 million undertaking, and I don't think there was a lot of revenue coming back yet. All right, so it's a bit of a lost leader now. That maybe down the road it can work. In the short term, it's going to be a bit of a money loser, and the catch of all of this and why it was on hiatus, as you mentioned this past year, is that the gentleman that is funding it is Ukrainian and probably has bigger things to worry about right now with the war over there and everything being frozen and all of his assets and stuff like that. So there isn't going to be one this fall either, this coming fall. It's on hiatus until the fall of 2024. And I do hope it gets off the ground again. Because it was tremendous to be a part of it. And I believe it helped the athletes. It definitely helped the athletes in Olympic year because they would have had hardly anything to do, but we were all bubbled, sort of like NHL hockey and basketball. And everybody was able to train at a higher level than they would have. A lot of people didn't even have access to pools, basically, back here in North America. So it was a really good situation for them, and they got a lot of racing in. And most of them actually could trace that to some success they had going into the Olympics.
And in Canada at the moment, we seem to have this, golden generation, quote unquote, at the moment, especially on the women's side, Penny Alexiak, Summer McIntosh, Maggie McNeil, etc. What's the cause of this recent surge over the past 7 or 8 years, and how much of it can be mentioned? You mentioned earlier the Pan Am Sports Center in Scarborough. Yeah.
I think a lot of it stems from the national center that was set up at the Pan Am Pool in the east end of Toronto here. But a facility is a facility is a facility, meaning, water is water. You can succeed anywhere if you have good, a reasonable facility. The key is coaching. You've got to have world-class coaching. And a good friend of mine and a colleague was Olympic coach for Britain. And I worked hard to convince him, as did some others, to come over here and be Canada's national coach based at that center. And the change was remarkable. I really believe we had some talent, and he was able to help take it to the next level. Kylie Moss wasn't part of the center at that time. She was with us here at the university downtown. But a majority of the athletes were a part of that center that obviously Penny Alexiak being the biggest name that everybody's heard of. And that was a bit of fortune on our part. And what I mean by that is, had the center been in any other city, Penny doesn't get noticed, right? But she gets noticed in Toronto. And then they make sort of an agreement where she's a bit too young to be there full time, but she does some in and outs and technique work, and eventually just gets to that center. So it was a phenomenal amount of success that was basically attributed to, I believe, the National Center. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I think part of it was also, these athletes, these children chose the sport of swimming. And you know what, had they chosen gymnastics or track or whatever, maybe they would have been good, maybe they wouldn't have been, but we would have lost them out of the sport of swimming. And when they were children, it was during Michael Phelps's move to the forefront of sport. And I'm talking all of sport, not just the sport of swimming, all right? So like 2004 to 2010, these kids would have been youngsters and deciding on different sports. And that was when Michael, you couldn't turn on a TV without hearing about Michael Phelps. And I think that may have been the spur, just like way back when Nadia Comaneci and Olga Kourmat were getting all those 10s in gymnastics in the 70s. The next 20 years, there was a huge influx of young girls going into gymnastics because of that stimulus. And I believe Michael probably deserves some of the credit for all these people choosing the sport of swimming over another sport.
And what's the knock-on effect of that? Of course, because Penny Alexiak inspired Summer McIntosh, for example, apparently, and how is that going to continue to knock on, do you think?
Well, and you're exactly right. So that helps, obviously, right? So now all of a sudden you've got that situation where young kids are saying, "I want to be like Penny," and they're gonna join the sport of swimming, and they're gonna stay with the sport of swimming, hopefully to realize their dreams, and that success begets success, as a lot of people will tell you. But you can't sit back on your laurels just because you're getting more talent in. You got to do the right things by that talent. You asked me earlier, what makes a kid from good to great? And again, I'll go back to what I said is you got to have great coaching to take that kid to the next level. And I'm not talking great coaching for the 18-year-old. You got to have great coaching at the 12 and 13-year level, because they've got to set up really good technique at that age. If you screw up their technique and screw up their desires at that age, they may not be around 3 or 4 years later or 5 years later when they can start to make a move. So, and the final thing I'll say on that is that, there might be somebody out of Timmins or, Kitchener-Waterloo or something that might not have been identified and might not have chosen the sport of swimming just because it may not be big in their community. Whereas now all of a sudden they might choose it, and maybe the coaches up there, because they're inspired as well by the whole situation of Canada winning, they're going to do a little bit better job. And those athletes then might progress and become part of the national team. So, we've even got some men right now. It takes longer to produce men at the world scene, but we've now got a couple of pretty good men on the program as well. It's not just women, which is nice to see as well as an example for young guys coming up.
And just how good can Summer McIntosh be? Obviously she's a heck of a swimmer already at 16, but how much further do you think she can develop?
The moon. She's going to go to the moon, all right? She's going to go to the stars, basically, right? This is a Michael Phelps type once in a generation athlete. And the reason it's a little bit different than someone like a Penny is Penny had a couple of events that she could swim extremely well and did very, very well. Whereas Summer can swim just about everything. It's phenomenal how the upside on this young woman. She will challenge for medals, probably even gold medals, in up to 4 or 5 events at the Olympic Games. And obviously the reason she's not going to be a Michael Phelps and win 8 gold medals is that the Americans win 3 gold medals in the relays all the time, almost always, right? And Canada, we don't have the depth usually to win a gold medal in the pool. We win medals, but the gold medals are a little bit tougher to get, right? So Summer's going to win a whole whack of individual medals, and she's going to be around for a while. I mean, we're talking in Paris, she's only going to be 18. Right. So, we're talking LA, she's going to be 22. 4 years later, she's still only going to be, whatever. Right. So, yeah, she's going to be around for quite a while. I would argue she's going to become a household name. And the good thing about it, Benedict, is she's got good grounding. Her mom was an Olympic athlete. Her mom knows what it's all about. All right. So, she's got a great family behind her. and she kind of gets it, and she works hard. She doesn't rely on her talent. Like she's the, you might think, oh, well, she's done so well already. Maybe she's going to, cruise a little bit, right? She's right in the water the next day, training hard, doing the things she needs to do. So this is going to be a joy for everybody out there to watch this woman's progress, because she is unbelievable.
And in recent years, you've also done a lot of work as a commentator for CBC, most notably. What's it like for you to be on the mic, and how does your experience, again, going back to coaching and swimming, and your expertise in that benefit you when it comes to calling these events?
Well, I mean, it benefits me tremendously. I wouldn't have been hired, I don't think, or wouldn't have stayed hired if I didn't know what I was talking about. So, it gives me the insight that I can then give to the viewer to say, look at what lane 3 is doing. Oh, they glided into the turn, or they did this wrong, or, they have a bizarre stroke, but it seems to work because of the X, and Y, right? So, my job is to get the viewer to understand what's happening. And I think if I didn't have a good background in coaching and the sport, both as an athlete and certainly, obviously, these many years as a coach, then I wouldn't be able to do as good a job, and I wouldn't be able to illuminate sort of what's happening for the viewers. So I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, it's mass media. It's exciting. And I do know there's a lot of people paying attention. So I've got to try to make sure that I do a good job. But it's fun. I mean, I've got the ringside seat for the biggest game in the world, right, at the Olympic Games. And so it's really, really great. I'm really happy I was able to be in the right place at the right time to get that job and be able to stay with it.
And you've been praised for your in-depth knowledge of seemingly every swimmer that competes. What does your research look like ahead of a competition, and how much do you sort of pride yourself on that?
Yeah, I do pride myself on that, right? It's something that I felt strongly about. Sometimes you have to go with your gut feeling, and my gut feeling was that the viewer wants to know more about these athletes. And once the gun goes, you can't really talk about that. Okay. This isn't baseball where there's a whole ton of time to kill and talk about the people involved. This is a 1 minute race where there's a lot of poop hitting the fan all of a sudden. Right. And you got to talk about the race and what's happening in the race and the strategy. You can't talk about the kid, the athlete. And so I just felt that was something that was missing. So I started to try to do as much research as I possibly could. And it was a challenge because there was no internet, obviously, way back. And so the only way to do it, again, was the benefit of being a coach, is that I knew other coaches and I could get in and talk to people. And I could talk to them, and I would travel to different competitions, and I would be able to see people and learn and talk and all of that. Now it's a bit easier because of the internet. But it's ongoing, Benedict. Like, in other words, like yesterday, I spent an hour writing down notes and everything that I could grab from competitions that are going on around the world. There's one in Australia going on right now, and you never know where there's going to, I get up and I read the Sydney Morning Herald, right? Newspaper, or the Brisbane, and then sometimes it'll be the British papers or something like it. You need to get your information anywhere, and the print media sometimes does a pretty good job of expanding a story, and they'll talk about people. And then there's interviews of swimmers done by a couple of major websites. And, I'll normally I probably wouldn't care to listen to a 60-minute or a 40-minute interview with a particular athlete, but I do, because I might pick up that little nugget of information, like the one I picked up about, a girl that during COVID was bored with doing the dryland Zoom, so she joined her father's trash hauling company, and she walked behind the truck in Birmingham, England, for 16 kilometers a day picking up garbage. All right. And she said, after 8 weeks, I realized I'm going to go back to the swimming. Right. It's a lot more fun. Right. So, but you pick up something like that, and it really, I don't know, it enhances the experience for the viewer. And I think the kids, I shouldn't call them kids, the athletes, like to be known for more than just somebody standing in a bathing suit, but it is ongoing, and it's a lot of work. And I don't, unlike NBC, where they have 3 or 4 researchers working for the commentators, I'm it. Right. So I do it all. So.
And finally, last question for you. What do you want to see from Canadian swimmers over the next year and a half in the lead up to Paris?
There's a bizarre situation happening right now in the sport of swimming. And what I mean by that is usually there's a World Championships the year out from the Olympic Games. And there's going to be one this summer. It's in Japan. But then there's another one that's thrown in February, which is to make up for the one that was, in essence, kind of canceled for COVID. And it's going to be very, very weird, because some of the athletes won't go. Some of the athletes will go. you might win easy. The medals might be easier to win, but at the same time, it's a weird time to try to win medals in February. So it's going to be a bit bizarre. So you can't sort of say, oh, well, we want success in all the big world meets leading into the Olympics, because there's going to be a little bit of picking and choosing that's going to be going on. So usually you've got to make a bit of a move the year before the Olympics. I mean, there are the exceptions like Penny Oleksiak, who was nowhere the year before the Olympics, and had such a gigantic improvement arc that she was able to get to the top of the podium a year later. But usually you want to succeed the year before in some fashion. Doesn't mean you got to win the gold medal. Doesn't mean you got to win the bronze medal, but you got to be in the hunt. And so this summer in Tokyo or in Japan, you want to have some success. And then come the Olympic Games, then obviously, for Canada, my hope is that everybody fires on all cylinders and continues their performances, their performance level that they're at now. All right. People think, oh, well, they're already ranked number 1 or number 3 in the world. That's easy. It's really hard to keep where you are at. The rest of the world is doing everything in their power 24/7 to try to beat you. And, there's a target on your back. And that was a tough one for Kylie when she broke the world record, because instead of the underdog, now all of a sudden she was a favorite. And it was a tough year that year. Right. And we made it through, but it was a whole different aspect. And so there's a lot of things at play when you're trying to repeat. And it's going to be a great Olympics for Canada, simply because I think Summer McIntosh is going to be on fire. And once you've got somebody like that, it actually reduces the pressure on the rest of the team, because now somebody's taking the mantle and running with it, and the others can just follow on that momentum and just win some more medals. So this could be one of the best Olympics ever for Canada in the pool, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know you're hoping for that. I know many Canadian fans are as well. Byron, it's been an absolute pleasure to get your insight and hear about your experiences, and I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Glad to do it, Benedict. Have a good day.
Thanks again to Byron MacDonald for joining the show, and thank you for listening to this episode of the True North podcast. If you like this and want to be the first person to listen to future episodes, as well as receive all new written stories right into your inbox, you can subscribe for free at truenorthsports.substack.com. You can also follow True North on Twitter at TrueNorth_sports and on Instagram at TrueNorthSport. My name is Benedict Rhodes, and thank you for listening to this episode. I'll see you again next time.